spending cuts, and included is extending that debt ceiling to $4 trillion. Not necessarily well received on the Senate, who is saying basically we're going to have to figure out how to negotiate this to a place where they can meet. The president immediately came out and said, this is great, but I also want to make those expiring tax provisions permanent, which increases the price tag on it and actually elevates the level of protection. So that negotiation is still going on, Eric, and they're going to have to figure out how they can reconcile those things. Remember, you can't get to reconciliation. The important thing there is it's a simple majority in the Senate until you get the budget done. So it's the next step in getting towards, that big tax bill that we've been talking about.
And Mark, there's been discussion on what is the cost of this bill. Is it the current policy, or is it the expiration of the Trump tax?
Right. It's current policy versus current law. So the way the House is looking at it, it's actually more expensive because they're looking at current law, which means those provisions expire, so it costs money to renew them in simple terms. The Senate is looking at it as current policy, which assumes today they have not expired. So it makes extending those tax provisions less expensive. That's another thing that's going to have to be debated between the two bodies.
That's a big deal.
It's a very big deal. Another big deal is, what's going on with the IRS. You're going to have a great conversation about that here shortly. There was a hearing in Ways and Means focused on IRS return on investment. We submitted testimony. We're constantly in contact with both, the IRS, Ways and Means, and Senate Finance about all of these issues. But we really focused on issues within our testimony that we submitted that focus on funding. We have discussed about the imbalance between the enforcement funding and what they need for services, and trying to figure out the appropriate balance to get out of that. And then, long-term modernization. What do you do about, making sure that you're engaged in a productive way with the practitioners? The customer service issues that we've been talking about. Technology is something, transparency, accountability. These are all things that have been, consistent coming from us over the years.
So, Mark, another big thing that we're going to be talking with Commissioner Reddick about in a few minutes is just what's going on with the IRS operations with all of the executive orders.
So obviously there's, a lot going on in Washington as it relates to the administration, the executive orders that are coming out. Also, the Elon Musk-led DOGE, which is, putting a lot of downward pressure on staffing and savings, cutting a lot of these agencies. Interestingly, though, we're starting to see some pushback in different areas. One is now that there are actually, cabinet's been confirmed by the Senate, there are heads of these agencies that are, asking questions and creating some confusion because, there's direction coming from this Department of Government Efficiency, and then agencies heads saying, well, wait a second, let's figure out, how we're going to respond to those requests. You have court challenges. We've talked a lot about that, and there have been stays on some of these executive orders. And then actually concern is starting to increase from Capitol Hill on the Republican side of the aisle because, again, trying to figure out if we're implementing policy, if we're implementing, spending, we want the agencies and the executive to follow through on those. So all of those things are in play. There is, a lot of confusion and a lot of questions. And again, the timing for the IRS hearing at Ways and Means was really good because, we are focused on service and how is the IRS as an organization get through all that and what is always a tough filing season.
Well, I know we've got a statement from our AICPA CEO, Mark Koziel, which we've got highlighted here as well as the J of A article.
Yeah, and so again, we've consistently talked about the importance of, the IRS functioning. We don't always agree with the IRS. Sometimes we take our voice there on behalf of our members, but we certainly want them to function the most effective, efficient way possible. And Mark's statement here, which we'll be consistent on, is making sure that there's the appropriate level of funding. Never going to be a blank check, but what's the appropriate level of funding for the services that taxpayers deserve and should get? How do you deal with modernizing the organization, and then reflecting honestly on the current state right now, where all of these agencies are under a lot of pressure. There's a lot of questions, the return to office mandate, the questions about not only some of the probationary decisions that were made about staff that was let go, but longer term reduction in force conversations going on. Again, we'll see how it all plays out. You've got the unions going to court, so that's going to play out. Again, I mentioned Capitol Hill raising some concerns, and even now that as agencies are getting heads sworn in, how's that going to work?
Well, Mark, I know there's an initiative the AICPA has launched related to a number of the displaced finance and accounting employees in the federal government.
Yeah, I mean, IRS absolutely comes to mind because you think of tax. But across government, what we've done is we've tried to create some resources for those displaced, CPAs or professionals that are in finance, in order to try and match them up with firms and memberships and any opportunities that are in our environment, because we all know that there is, and we discussed this on town halls, we do have a capacity need in the profession, and the firms are looking for that capacity. And if that can meet up with some of the disruption that's occurred for people, I think that's a phenomenal answer. And then one other thing, Eric, before we go on, is I did want to mention we do have some a new update on BOI. So it's a discussion that we've had over the last few years, almost every town hall, and Lisa's not going to let you down, and we're going to talk about it a little at the end of the hour. But we do our best to get, we say it all the time, the best possible information. The team had a conversation with FinCEN this week, and I just want to let you know how that went, Eric. So the administration acknowledged, I want to be very specific, the administration acknowledged that they were very serious about reducing the burdens on businesses. And basically what FinCEN has said through their website is during this 30-day period that they will be assessing options to modify the deadlines and to prioritize reporting, and those entities that pose the most significant national risk, national security risk. And I just want to remind everybody, this all came from the Corporate Transparency Act, which underneath that was the beneficial ownership information requirement. That's all related to money laundering. And so that's always been the goal of FinCEN, which is the Financial Crimes Unit at Treasury. So we believe that we are going to be getting more information and more guidance soon. I wish I could give you more than soon, but the best I can do today with the information we have is that they're focused on this, they've been listening, and we're going to hear something soon. Having said that, Lisa's also going to talk to you about the legislation that we still think we should be supportive of, because we want to make sure that we cover all bases here.
Well, Mark, I mean, you've been covering this, for the past year. You covered what the Treasury Secretary Besson said in his testimony about being concerned about the burden related to the small business community. So this seems in line with that. So we'll, as soon as this news breaks, we will bring this to the town hall community. It seems like it's going in a good direction to reduce the burden.
It appears that way. Stay tuned. We're on it, and we will share information as soon as we get it.
Well, Mark, next up is a discussion with the former IRS commissioner. So I want to bring Commissioner Rettig up, as well as Melanie Lauritsen. Melanie, Commissioner Rettig, great to be with you today.
Thank you for including me. Appreciate it.
Well, we've got plenty to talk about. So first, let me introduce Commissioner Rettig. I think you all know him very well. His bio is in our resource file. An incredible career. Most recently, serving as IRS Commissioner from 2018 to 2022 under both President Trump and Biden, under both Secretary Mnuchin and Secretary Yellen. A number of major acts of legislation passed during his time. So he's going to have some tremendous perspective for us today. He's currently a shareholder at Chamberlain in Herlica, supporting tax filers. So welcome. And Melanie, before I'm going to have you jump in here with a number of questions. But to kick things off, Commissioner, we're highlighting here an opinion piece that came out earlier this week which was penned by 7 former IRS commissioners. I know you played a very active role here. It truly is an unprecedented time with all of the executive orders that are underway, also being in tax filing season, and a lot of anxiety related to a pretty significant piece of tax legislation coming up. So I'll let you share a little bit of background related to this opinion piece, as well as just your overall thoughts on the current state of the IRS. But welcome, Commissioner.
Yeah, thank you. The New York Times opinion piece was really coordinated by all of the commissioners, with the exception of everybody's calling out, well, where's Doug Schwinn? Doug is CEO of a public company, and we didn't think it was prudent to include Doug and thereby maybe some lateral into his company. So he doesn't disagree with us, but there were other reasons for not participating. The concept of the New York Times article is very good. No CEO would cut its accounts receivable department. You would do so in a balanced approach if you were, restrained from some perspective. And so it was the idea of getting out there. I think more important than maybe even the topic was to see the 7 commissioners and the different matter, you might see the 8 commissioners join together across administrations. I think it was a very strong statement, and we know it was very well received by the employees who are highly stressed in the current environment. So there's a lot of related issues that come out anytime you see a single commissioner make a statement, let alone a whole group of commissioners. And as you had in the slide, we served every president since President Reagan, and I think that's a pretty powerful comment.
That really is, and I would like to thank you for your profound dedication to the profession, because you have been going with the profession for so many years, and it shows, and it is really appreciated. So with everything that's going on right now, could you provide some advice to our members as to how to best interact with the IRS right now on technical matters, or if we should be doing anything differently to interact with the IRS?
So patience is really important. The folks at the IRS are doing their best. We had situations. You had the new hires, if you will, probationary employees, be let go. A lot of those folks were brought in and trained by people who are currently on board. So there's, what's happening. You saw the announcement this week. Be prepared for a large-scale reduction in force by summer, sometime June or July. We've got a tremendous amount of folks at the IRS who are eligible to retire. Something like 75% of the workforce eligible to retire within the next 5 years. A lot more are eligible to retire within 2 or 3 years. So in interacting, if you have an examination or a case with the IRS, and interacting with, my first thing would be patience. My second would be make copies of everything you provide, digital or otherwise. There's some of the folks who are leaving the exam function of the IRS are being instructed to no change and close down the particular examination. But if the matters are going to be reassigned, and some will be reassigned, if the matter is going to be reassigned, you want to make sure that everything that you've provided is there, and just human nature, what we've seen in the past. The new person assigned to a matter doesn't always pick up and have the same interest factor that the last person had, particularly when there's fewer new people to accept reassignments, which is why I think you're going to see a lot of matters closed in the process rather than have adjustments that move into appeals or litigation. I think you're going to see the agency in general sort of hunker down, if you will. I think in personal interactions with particular revenue agents, I think it's okay to express concerns. Don't get political. You don't know what side a particular agent may be on. But just, how are you doing? Hey, we're here for you. And I would drop in a line and say the tax professional community is here for you. When I was commissioner, I was still a tax guy in my head from the tax professional community. And knowing, you well know, there were many times the AICPA, as well as, individual tax professionals reached in and gave us a heads up to this or that, and we would tweak things as we went through. The value to that was beyond the particular item that somebody reached through. It allowed me to show the workforce, if you will, it's not an us versus them process. That professionals are standing up for us. The one that I've used 100 times, I won't get off topic, but was the tax professional community translated our EIP outreach materials from English in 35 different languages in 5 days. We never would have been able to. The employees really appreciated that. Coming back to the examination issue, is really just make your, if somebody's not there, still send in your stuff in a timely manner. Be as complete as you can. Do as much as you can in writing. The writings will end up in the file, the original file. And so the new person can get up to speed in a hurry. My overall thing has always been in 42 years of practice. Maintain the appearance of reasonableness throughout. Particularly when you're dealing with people, and these are my terms, you're dealing with people that are stressed. The best you can do is be the reasonable person rather than the one that jumps on. They keep asking for the same things. With this person, it's long in a very friendly manner. I got that question probably 40 times. I testified about 37 times in the Senate Finance. And post-COVID, and working in the office, so to speak, we can tell the productivity. We're a numbers. Iris was a numbers organization, so the question was constantly, we're trying to attach remote work with not working. The fact is, a tremendous amount of Iris employees work remotely now. When we went into COVID, we were about 16% remote work eligible. I think by September or October, we were 92% remote work eligible. It's no different than the private sector, but the return to work issue, which there are contracts with NTU and others that allow employees the opportunity to work remotely. And a lot of people were hired in remote locations on the ability to work remotely. So the return to the office issue is going to be significant immediately and over the longer term. So if they're going to press the issue and everybody needs to be in the office 5 days a week, like some other big companies, I think you'll see another wave of people walk out the door. The folks who have come on board last 2 or 3 years are spectacular, highly credentialed, highly experienced. They get it. They came on board making a difference. And in some sense, the remote was one of the issues for them. You've got people with families, right? And what we ran into with IRS during COVID, we found out was an aging workforce is not just the children, but you've got people who are taking care of their parents. If you're going to choose between your parents and driving an hour to get into the office or a different position, I think most people pick that different position.
So thank you for those insights. And I'm going to shift gears a little bit. As you are very well aware, each year the IRS updates their contingency plan in the event of a government shutdown. And often that plan is not needed. However, when you were the commissioner, you were the commissioner for the longest IRS shutdown, lasting 35 days, and also during the COVID period. So what are your thoughts of the current contingency plan in the event of a shutdown?
So I became somewhat of a master of the shutdown, right? The training was 35 days, and then in March of 2020, whether you like it or not, I am the person who shut down the Internal Revenue Service, 519 offices, brought our people home from around the world, et cetera, and then had to go into the plan. So IRS has plans, and they're on the shelf and you prepare as you go into the likelihood of government shutdown. And the real thing is who's an essential employee, who's not essential employee. I think critical, and we talked about this, Melanie, on more than one occasion. I think something that's critical is in the 35-day shutdown, and to give you an example of how capable the IRS employees are, 35-day shutdown, we opened on, my recollection, it was January 28th, which was the same day we opened filing season. So the essential employees are the filing, included the filing season employees. They did all their homework, they did all their testing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We go back to the office, so to speak, and also launch filing season, and that was an incredibly successful filing season. And, filing season is measured not by the upside, but the downside. So successful in that we didn't have glitches that shut it down. One thing we did learn at that point in time is that, and this is a tax lawyer giving you the technology side of the house, but we had incredible volumes coming through per second, per minute, per hour, and we created a reservoir, and so we sort of had a back channel where electronic returns coming in, and we would kind of park them in this reservoir and then take them out of the reservoir on our schedule. So we kind of throttling up and throttling down, rather than having a logjam and it clogs the system. That all happened in the fly at that particular time, with employees coming through a shutdown. And the last thing I want to say is, society isn't always friendly to federal employees in this shutdown. They're not being paid. And people say, well, they will be paid, so why do I concern about them? And the issue is, a lot of employees, in public or private sector, live paycheck to paycheck. So they're not able to make a car payment, a rent payment, a house payment. We have to factor that in when we're also asking them to take care of the most significant cyber defense on behalf of the country, of non-military cyber defense. Factor in that they're also struggling with their own issues. And I think that's critical when I come back to how do you interact with somebody in the IRS. Express appreciation for what they're doing. A lot of people don't. And so the little words, I guarantee you, make a difference.
Well, Melanie, I was going to hop in here. We've got a lot of questions coming in. A couple of them are technology questions. Just so it's something I know, Commissioner, you thought a lot about during your time there, state of technology at the IRS. I actually know right now, being back in practice, and you're active with some technology solutions that are helping prepare us. You have both sides, the technology platforms of the IRS and the evolution of technology on the practitioner side, and also Gen AI is playing a big role.
AI is here. Everybody's talking about when it gets here. That's just generational. If you talk to the 8-year-olds, they know it's here. So let's get more like the 8-year-olds. It is the future, and we did it inside IRS. AI drove our audit plans throughout the time that I was there, 2018 to 22. AI is the ability to leverage otherwise scarce human resources. I think, Eric and Melanie and a lot of others are aware when I came out of the IRS, essentially there's a 2-year ban from touching IRS or Department of Justice. They are very active in a number of things, including in the digital world, how to help in the accounting profession. You all know my wife's a tax accountant. I know a lot of folks. There are not enough people to actually take care of what needs to be taken care of. And I joked the other day, both with Eric and Melanie, I said, when was the last time somebody said, in the high school student said, hey, can you talk to my son or daughter? They want to be an accountant, right? We've got to get back to that. We've got to get back to the profession is critical. The world can't go without it. But the link, I think, is AI and technology, and something that I'm very proud to be involved with is K1X. K1X digitizes the K1s. So rather than having somebody go through an accounting degree and go to work in an accounting firm, go to the back room and do inputting information into the computer, I'm wondering, is this the best that I'm going to be able to do? And they shouldn't do it just as we did, right? We got to move with the times. And so I think that those types of things, and you guys know even better than I how much is out there, but let me touch about from the IRS perspective on technology just quickly. In the last 2 years, IRS launched more digital tools in the taxpayer service space than they did in the previous 20 years. Self-service options, multilingual, mobile friendly. You're going to be able to have a tax return from a cell phone, right? And that's where the world is. IRS is playing catch up. In the enforcement side of the house, the technology that's inside the IRS is able to identify areas of non-compliance that they wouldn't even have thought existed just 2 years ago. So technology has just taken the agency to another level. And in closing, as we come back and express thoughts about the workforce is different. The workforce inside the IRS is definitely more technical. We talked about data scientists. Unfortunately, a large group of data scientists were brought on board with it last year and were let go last week. But data scientists are probably among the most important people inside the IRS. They tell the IRS where the areas of non-compliance are, and then you go there. It's the drones in the military concept. Go find what we're looking for and then send the troops in that way. That's what we did with respect to IRS. So the world is significantly different than what we all grew up.
Eric, do you want to throw one last question, or should I?
Yeah, why don't you go with a couple lightning round questions here? We got like 2 minutes left here for this segment. We've got over 800, I don't know, maybe 600 questions have come in. So we've got a lot of fantastic feedback, good dialogue with the town hall community. And we've got well over 12,000 people on with us today, close to 13,000.
So Commissioner Reddick, something that is very near and dear to both our hearts, prepare regulation.
Yep.
In the last, the TAS discussion draft, they included the ability for the IRS to be able to revoke the PTINs. What do you think of that proposal?
So when I was on the outside, I would have said they should not be allowed to do that. And I know folks who had a revocation of the PTIN, and it is just hell getting it back. Some of those revocations happened by mistake, it was erroneous, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Or a cleanup didn't catch up to the system. And it's happened to people during filing season, and that absolutely should not be the case. On the inside, you see different things, and you see examples of, we want to think that people get up in the morning and they're going to do their homework and try to do the right thing. It doesn't mean you're going to get to the right answer. It's going to mean they did the right thing, right? You tried to get to the right answer. And there can be a disagreement as to what the right answer is. The IRS sees a lot of situations. And unfortunately, if all day long you're seeing overly aggressive positions taken by certain groups of folks, you tend to get jaded. And they're no different than other people. There are people who go to work, but if you're seeing 10, 20, 30 aggressive things, taking advantage of people in underserved communities, et cetera, adding things into a return, unfortunately, that creates the us versus them. And they start to discredit all the rest of us on the outside that are trying to do the right thing. We work really hard to try, as did the AICPA and the state societies, to try to be on the team of saying, let's collectively look for the folks who are not doing it right and support the ones who are doing it right. It's hard to do that with somebody who's just seeing things that we don't, the rest of us don't. I'm not saying that probably is more than they should, but I think that the IRS does need to have regulation. If you saw the bottom of the barrel, so to speak, you would agree with that. They don't need it. CPAs, they have their own regulation, right? All the rest of this, that's like personal reaction. Nobody handed you your CPA license. Very difficult to get. You have to do a lot of education to retain it and experience. But, in terms of return preparation, people get swept into the same pool. So with that, Melanie, I just proved that I'm a lawyer because I can give a non-answer to a very straightforward, simple question. But I want people, in closing, let me give 30 seconds.
Yeah, give it, that'd be fantastic. Yeah.
I want people to be proud to be in the profession that you're in. This country doesn't operate without accountants. It doesn't operate without AICPA and similar. The financial markets, the business markets, the government, whether somebody's in-house, out-of-house, private practice, we need to know if the financial data is accurate, tax returns in other ways. Similarly, I really want you to be proud of the people at the IRS. I talked about that they're stressed and this and that. I can tell you in 44 years, so I worked with thousands and thousands of people at IRS. Before I went on board, I was frontline in the fields when I was there. You know, it's kind of a thing, I guess it became that every day I was in every IRS facility, I ate the cafeteria, there was no commissioner section. I walked up and ate with whoever had an empty seat next to them. And I met a whole lot of frontline people. I can tell you, they're trying hard. If you have three people, they're going to have different abilities. I didn't say I want all of you to, bat 400. I want each of you to try your best. And I would always say, I have good days and bad days. You have good days and bad days. On your bad day, I want your best for your bad day. On your good day, I want your best for your good day. And we need a fully functioning Internal Revenue Service. We're all talking about filing season and the rest. I was the COVID commissioner. CARES Act, March 27, 2020, that statute said IRS and EIPs issue these payments as rapidly as possible. That was March 27. April 10, exactly 2 weeks later, we issued hundreds of millions of payments, hundreds of billions of dollars. People say, well, should they have issued that? That's tax policy. That's Treasury, Congress, and the administration. We administer the law that's fed to us. And I gotta tell you, what I see now, if we had another COVID situation or a similar crisis, I'm not sure the IRS could step in like they did. They stepped in because they knew the value of something on behalf of the country. And they went above and beyond, right, at that point in time. So we gotta watch things like morale and really the interest. It's not just the body count, but it's getting them interested. And morale, tax professionals can have an impact in a good way on the morale of the workers. You can disagree how they handle your matter, but I think you have to agree that we need a functioning IRS. So I've overspoke. Eric, I apologize. Melanie, I apologize. It's so unlike me to do that, but get passionate about this.
Well, hey, Commissioner Reddick, thank you for your passion. Melanie, thank you for all you're doing in the DC office. I know you're connecting with the IRS every day, and your opening remarks about the commissioner here and how much he has done for the profession, for America. So thank you very much. And we look forward to having you back on a future town hall. Maybe we can unpack further a number of other issues. Thanks again.
Eric, it was a team effort. AICPA is critical to the operations of the Internal Revenue Service, the state agencies, and so are the individual tax professionals. And so, that's where my heart is. It's with all of you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Melanie. Okay, that was a great segment. Now with me here in New York is my good friend, the editor of Accounting Today, editor-in-chief, very well known to the profession as well, like Commissioner Reddick. We are very much looking forward to this preview of the Top 100 Firm Report. It's eagerly awaited every year. Lisa Simpson, great to have you with us as well. So welcome, Dan.
Thanks for having me. This is great.
Eric, I'm one of those that eagerly awaits the Top 100 report. It's always full of such great insight into the thinking around growth strategies and where firms are heading toward in terms of service offerings. So Dan, I'm waiting. When do I get my copy?
Well, Dan, show the audience that the copy. It is in its final reviews, and it is absolutely worth the read. It hits on business model evolution, the niche areas that are growing, client categories, talent hiring. So let's just jump right into it. And you put together this slide here highlighting some of the key findings.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a weird year, I gotta say. It's a little unusual. We've teased out to Venus, we've talked about some of the trends, and some of them seem at first glance maybe a little negative, but it's more just interesting. There's a lot of developments going on. We'll start by saying that the growth rate is lower. The last 2 years were tremendous growth rates for the top 100 firms. It's a little lower. It's around 4.89% is the average growth rate for all those firms. Some of that's due to the billion-dollar firms at the top of the profession, the big four in particular. Their growth rates returned to a more common rate for them around somewhere between 1, 2, 3%. And that, because they're huge, they weigh heavily on the profession. So when you see a 4.89% growth rate compared to an 18% from the previous report, and similar from the year before that, it seems like it's a down year. Really, though, when you start looking deeper into the numbers, you see some other things going on. We mentioned 45 of the firms reported double-digit growth, but 3 reported growth over 100%. So you're seeing some of these firms are growing at rates that are insane. One particular firm grew at 300% over the course of 2024. That's crazy. We're going to talk about some of the details of that, but what it all points to is there is a bunch of changes going on in the largest firms, and a lot of them repeat down through smaller firms as well. We're seeing these huge changes going on in the structure of accounting firms and how they work and how they're put together. And it ends up giving us these different growth rates and these different sets of differential numbers between different cohorts. So for instance, when you look at the median growth rate for all the top 100 firms, it's almost 17%. That's pretty respectable, right? You would say that's great growth. We'd be very happy to have that. And we'll see, there's a chart later where we'll talk about where we break down the different cohorts, the billion-dollar firms, the firms between 100 million and $1 billion in revenue, and then the firms under 100 million in revenue. And you'll see those growth rates for those 2 bottom cohorts are pretty strong as well. They're between 13 and 14%. So again, respectable growth all around. That headline number doesn't necessarily do justice to what's going on across the whole list.
Well, when you have a median growth rate of 16.91%, half going, more than that, that's pretty significant. The previous 2 years, we do have a chart coming up. They were like, great years. And this was a very, very good year, 2024.
Right, that's the story. It's not bad. It's not terrible. It's just, it's a little different from the previous years. And again, we're going to see, we have another chart that will show up.
We're gonna break out the growth, but this is an interesting data point. Just the entrance of the $1 billion club.
Right. We would have, there's 16 this year. There were 16 last year. We would have 17, except because of the addition of Cohn-Resnick. But the combination of CBiz and Markham obviously took one firm out of there. So it's still, when you think about it, it's still growing, right? The number of firms that are joining that $1 billion club is continuing to grow up. One thing we pointed out, because we had some questions about how should we name some of these firms. You see, like we got Eisner Advisory Group. Well, is that Eisner Advisory Group? Is it Eisner Amper? What is it? CBiz is CBiz and CBiz CPAs. It used to be CBiz and MHM. And so we're seeing that when you start pulling through that, you look at all these names and realize how many of these firms aren't structured like traditional accounting firm partnerships, right? Even when you talk about BDO, right now it's an ESOP. You talk about some of those firms that have taken on PE money, so they're alternative practice structures. Some of them are public, CBiz, for instance. And you realize how few of these firms are the traditional accounting firm partnership model, and how much more those other models are penetrating into not just the profession as a whole, but particularly these $1 billion firms. It's, when you look at the rest of the list, you see similar sort of wide range of models that firms can follow. It's really kind of exciting. It's confusing and complicated, but it's exciting and interesting.
Well, I mean, this is, kind of stating the obvious, but now you have to be $2 billion now to be in the top 10. Yep. And there's been a lot of changing of the order here. I think yesterday we heard another PE deal, Cohn-Resnick. I think we're going to be hearing more, large mergers in the coming months. Sure. There's rumors out there. So this is going to be a very fluid list.
Yes, very much so. Though it's interesting, we were talking earlier about when you look at the next tier of firms below $1 billion, there's really only 7 or 8 firms between 500 million and $1 billion. So that's a pretty small group of firms if you're looking to make a huge matchup. It's a relatively small group of firms to pick from. There's obviously lots of firms below them to work on, but the M&A calculations just get more and more complicated, more and more interesting all the time.
Yeah, I mean, the 16th firm, Cohn-Resnick, $1 billion, and you showed me the list of 24th firm. I won't give the name, but that's about 500 million.
Yep.
Now. So the top 25 is $500 million and above. So Lisa, we'll let you get in here in a moment, but here's the chart that you were kind of highlighting and you described what happened in 2024. You see the $1 billion and above number of 3.75. That is driven by the big four numbers. There's a couple of the big four that are at like 0.5% to 2%, and there's one big four like around 3%.
Right. And then when you look at some of the other $1 billion firms, there's a lot that are in that similar sort of 1 to 5% growth range. There are a few doing very well and much higher than that, but that's that 3.75 for all of those 16 firms is the sort of average there. But then when you look at the firms that are $100 million to $1 billion, right? Almost 14% growth. That's fantastic. In any year, you would be happy to have that. And then the firms under $100 million, similarly, 13% growth, very strong. What's interesting and what we think is mostly happened is that a lot of the consulting work that is so much more important for the billion-dollar firms than it is for the firms below $1 billion, and particularly for below $100 million. A lot of that consulting work, we saw firms literally just announce it, say, hey, we got less consulting work than we expected. We found less of it. In some cases, they laid off staff in their consulting divisions, not just in the big four, but in some of the other billion-dollar firms as well. So we think that's what happened, right? Consulting work fell back a little bit. That hurt those billion-dollar firms. The other firms that are growing very strong rely less on them.
And Lisa, we've been at the town hall now for 5 years. We're coming up on our 5-year anniversary. So you look at 20. We know we've been talking about the what's been happening for the last 5 years on the town hall. 2020, it was a year that the firms actually had high profits. The revenue growth wasn't as high, but then 21, 22, and 23, some really, really high growth numbers. The consulting, the digital transformation, what Dan was just talking about, the consulting area growth, that really was strong with the big four in 22 and 23. But at least I think it's also interesting to look at the overall trend. But overall, this marketplace is doing very well, and that's another reason why there's so much private equity coming into the market.
Absolutely, and we're seeing that private equity coming in because they look to the accounting profession to be a great stable opportunity, but also an opportunity for consolidations, which you're seeing in the growth of those billion-dollar firms. A lot of this growth that's being reported is inorganic. It's driven by mergers and acquisitions, and we'll see a little bit of that, especially on the next slide. But I think it's important to keep in mind where we were in 2020 versus where we are today. It's been several successful years, and now things might be normalizing a little bit over those high growth trends. But all in all, a good story to tell about the accounting profession.
So let's dig a little bit into some of the stories of some of the high. Last year we highlighted this chart. It was actually more driven by private equity than what we're calling these platform firms. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about the top three here for highest growth.
Sure. I'm so excited that I keep knocking out my earpiece. Sorry about that. Because this is exciting stuff. We just sit in our offices and work on all this stuff. We don't get to talk about it. This is our first chance to talk to anybody about it. So it's pretty exciting. But yeah, this chart is really interesting because it's very different from last year's. Those top three firms there, right? Crete, Ascend, Springline, those are all, and no one's figured out the right name for this. We internally think of them as hub and spoke firms, right? They are a PE-driven membership platform firm that then goes out and acquires a number of accounting firms. Those accounting firms function effectively independently to a certain degree, varying obviously from firm to firm. They keep their own names, they keep their own operations, they're operating in their own markets. That's very different from last year's top three, which were also PE-backed, but they were Cherry Bekaert, Citroen Cooperman, Eisner, Amper. So firms, accounting firms, their own standalone license.
I mean, Crete is not a CPA licensed firm.
Right. It's a platform that owns a number of accounting firms,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Whereas last year, the top three were those licensed accounting firms that were going out and using PE money to acquire other accounting firms to bring them in. So this is a very different model, but also you've seen tremendous growth rates. Crete started from a small number, but still in a single year to bring on that many firms to acquire that kind of growth, just amazing. And we're seeing, below that, some of those other firms are probably Smith and Howard, right? Was one of the pioneers of PE, particularly for smaller firms, and they're having strong growth rates. CBIZ and CBIZ CPAs is in there largely because of that merger with Markham, right? $2 billion firms. That's a big boost. But so it's interesting, like I said, is that this shows up the importance of PE that Lisa mentioned, but also the variety of models that PE brings, right? The different kind of ways you can interact with PE or the PE can interact with the profession. And it just talks to, again, and it's always good to bring this up, right? Tremendously good times for accounting firms, right? It's a good time to be an accountant. It's a good time to be running a firm.
And it's a good time to explore business models. I've had the chance to record podcast interviews with the leaders at Ascend and Springline, and we'll send out the links to those in the town hall newsletter. But it is a different model, and it is designed to help business owners, the firm leaders, run the business and give them the support that they're looking for to run the business. But you've also got Dean Dorton, which is an independent firm in Kentucky and Indiana. So, it doesn't mean that you have to take a PE investment to have high growth. You just got to be strategic. You got to know what your plan is and then go execute on the plan in a way that makes sense. So challenge your model. Doesn't mean that there's one right model or one wrong model. That's another amazing thing about the profession, are all the options we have.
Well, let's just go a little bit into some of the service line drivers.
Yep, absolutely. So CAS is the big story here, as it was last year. Continues to be just an area that you see from this number. 80% of the top 100 firms are seeing growth in. Now, I need to be careful about this. It doesn't mean it's their fastest growing area. It just means that they're seeing growth there. We'll talk about where it's the fastest growing in the next slide, but it's still it's astonishing. There has it's never been anybody challenging a test for lead in this area the way CAS has over the last few years. It hasn't always been number one, but it's been number one or number two. We expect it to continue to grow. The interesting thing is that for the top 100, the amount of revenue they're getting from CAS is pretty low compared to tax and the test. We're expecting that to grow. We started tracking that independently for the first time this year, and we're a little bit surprised that the revenue numbers were that low, but we expect it to grow pretty quickly.
Well, and we're going to be highlighting our CAS. I know you're familiar with it, our CAS benchmarking survey report. It's something that people are still trying to get their arms around. So even I took a look at your draft report, and some firms are even say that they just they're not tracking it yet. So it's a very high growth area. You know, client accounting services, outsourced accounting services. It's still in, I think, the early stages of the movement. I mean, cloud accounting enabled it. There's a lot of value there. But just this actually highlights that the last slide said they're growing, but this shows you that it is the fastest growing area.
Right, and this is the thing that's really for us the most surprising. I talked about this a little bit last year, but I'm still surprised by it, is the number of firms that said it was their fastest growing, right? So the previous slide was firms where they're seeing growth in it, but it's not necessarily their fastest. This is the percentage of firms that are saying it's their fastest growing area. And you see those numbers are climbing both for the top 100 firms, but also for our top 100 firms and the regional leaders, which are smaller firms that are leading in different sub-geographies of the country. So you're looking at 37% or something like that of all the firms in this report are saying it's their fastest growing, and something like 26% among the top 100. That's unprecedented. We've never seen that kind of coalescence around a single service area as the fastest growing. For that many firms to say it's the fastest growing, it just, and for the second year in a row, just suggests this is an area with a lot of growth in it. And I know the benchmark survey was talking about for the next 3 to 5 years, they're predicting similar levels of growth. So it's pretty exciting. It's
at least, and Dan, this is something we talk about, the evolution of the strategies here. This is for a future town hall segment where we'll talk about how firms are setting up their advisory area. The client accounting is just one element of other advisory services. CFO advisory, another very strategic area. So just lots of opportunity. I mean, Lisa, this is something, I'll let you maybe have a closing comment here on this, but we'll talk about this further. This is a 40-page report that really shows you what the high-performing firms are doing to build greater success. It's a free download. I think we even have it in our resources for you today.
Thanks, Eric. And, for all of our small firm friends, I don't want you to think that we're just focused on what the top 100 firms are doing. But again, from my perspective, if you look at the slide that shows the service line growth breakdown, if you're in a small firm and you're thinking about where should my niche be, or how can I meet my growth objectives, which are your growth objectives, not the growth objectives for the top 100 firms, think about where the service lines are growing and what services you want to provide to which clients, in what way. A lot of great insights that'll be coming out from Dan's report, and we'll spend more time talking about how those insights can translate down to our smaller firms in just a minute. But for now, I'm going to do a lightning technical update. So Eric,
a quick thank you to Dan here. But Dan will be
Thank
back
you,
for a little
Dan.
bit more, which will be short.
Awesome.
And people want to know, can they get this digitally? The answer is yes. And we'll put information about how to get it in our newsletter that'll come out Tuesday.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you,
Lisa.
Dan. Okay, lightning round. So Eric, keep your hand on the clicker because we're going to go fast. The first one is simply an announcement about tax relief related to disasters in Kentucky that started around February 14th, and it provides taxpayer relief for filings of many, many types of individual and business returns until November 3rd. Really quickly, I'm not going to go into details on the next slide. We'll come back to that because it relates to an AICPA recommendation for the tax policy. And we'll table this one for another one because I really want to talk about BOI. And I'm guessing there are a few of you in the audience that want to talk more BOI based on the comments that I'm seeing coming through. As a reminder, if we step back and look high level, we do have three forces at play around BOI. Legal, which we'll talk about next, the regulatory and administrative, which Mark Peterson kind of hinted at, and then where we are in the legislative process. So quickly, from a legal standpoint, hopefully most of you are aware that on February 17th, the federal district court lifted the last remaining nationwide injunction that had halted BOI filings. That's when FinCEN came out and said, we're going to give everyone until March 21. Now, Mark Peterson told us earlier that we expect to see some kind of relief, and we expect that relief to be vast, but it will not be relief for every single entity who's required to file a BOI report. So please stay tuned on that. And again, we'll let you know as soon as we hear anything. Additionally, from an administrative perspective, the penalties have increased because they're tied to inflation rates. There is one other legal case out there that we'll keep our eye on, and we'll let you know if anything comes about for that. From a legislative standpoint, Mark mentioned a call to action. We don't want to rely on simply an administrative relief option. Let's go ahead and keep our foot on the gas and contact our Senate delegate for a relief bill to pass through there as well. We know that the House bill passed 408 to 0, so true bipartisanship there. Now let's get it through the Senate. So be looking for more information about our call to action. This CTA is designed to press legislation forward that will give a 1-year delay to let this legislative dust settle, to let the administrative dust settle, and the legal dust settle. And as a reminder, this legislation as posed only relates to entities that were formed before January 1. So again, that is a lightning round update on BOI, but I just wanted to make sure that we offered some insight on the legislation. Please stay tuned, and you can stay tuned. Melanie Lauridsen on LinkedIn, AICPA on LinkedIn. I'm reposting as soon as Melanie shares any information, so really, seriously, stay tuned if you're interested in BOI.
Well, thanks, Lisa. That was a fantastic lightning round. We can drop the slides there. Commissioner, great to have you back with us. We only have a couple of minutes. Mark, I'll just, where are we at? We're at 800 questions have come in today. And they're on both sides. I mean, in one thing, it is a very dynamic time in Washington, D.C. And there's a lot of people trying to, advance their different causes. But Mark, I don't have to tell you that there's differing views out there on, where the AICPA should be on, one issue versus the next.
No, I understand that, and it's an incredibly challenging dynamic, not just for us, but for every profession and every industry. We're navigating through that. What we're trying to do is to position the profession for success. And so, we use the word translate and navigate and educate. We've got to navigate the rocks to make sure that we can get through the politics, right? For the best possible outcome. We need to translate from what the membership needs and the taxpayers need to the policymakers. And then we got to educate them on why it matters. And those are all things that we do every day, Eric. And we will continue to do it. And it's not easy, and the environment is super challenging. But we've got something to say, and people will listen, and we're just going to keep it up.
Well, thanks, Mark. I think, Lisa, you and I, we've got 2 minutes left. One thing we do is we end the town hall on time. So I want to thank Dan Hood again, Commissioner Reddick, and Melanie and Mark for your time today. It was a very active hour, and it was very, very well received. So thanks.
And Eric, as we're going to the closing slides, a quick thank you to Commissioner Reddick. Those words of support for the profession and our members really meant a lot. You're getting lots of thank yous for those very kind words. So we do appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thanks. So let's bring the slides back up. It is tax season, and we've been talking about what AI is doing and technology is doing to help the tax practitioners. So this is a tool that many members, small firms of all sizes, are finding value in. So there's an upcoming free webinar to learn more about this tool that we're helping launch to our firms. We have the town hall rebroadcast on Mondays. It will be this upcoming Monday, March 3rd at 1 p.m. And a lot of questions on how to make sure you're on the newsletters. This is how you can make sure you're receiving it, townhall@hq.cpa.com. And we've got a special resource center, which includes all of this information, which you can find at cpa.com/townhall. So here's the upcoming shows that we have planned. It is a busy time for all of you, and our next one is March 20th, taking that into consideration. We will, though, do a special broadcast, or we will absolutely provide you breaking news through the town hall newsletter. Here's the schedule through June. Lisa, great being with you today. I'll let you have the closing remarks for the town hall community.
Just a wonderful conversation today about how dynamic the profession is and how important the profession is. So keep that in mind as you work through your the rest of your busy season, and we look forward to being back in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you for your participation. You can now subscribe to the AICPA Town Hall series on your favorite podcast platform, as well as watch archives on YouTube and AICPA TV. Tune in for live broadcasts Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. As well as watch archives on YouTube and AICPA TV. Tune in for live broadcasts Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. As well as watch archives on YouTube and AICPA TV. Tune in for live broadcasts Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Time.